Airport personnel humiliated Sasha Obama, but everything changed dramatically when her father arrived. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share in the comments where you're tuning in from. The city of Washington, D.C. Ed was bathed in the soft glow of dawn, with streaks of orange and pink stretching across the horizon. Sasha Obama, now 21 and determined to make a name for herself, independent of her family's legacy, adjusted her backpack and glanced at her phone. The time read 6:30 a.m. sharp. She was heading to New York City, invited to present her research at a prominent youth conference, a prestigious platform where brilliant young minds exchange ideas and insights. As anticipation mingled with nerves, her mind raced with practiced lines and potential questions she might face. Her father's words of encouragement from the previous night lingered in her thoughts. "You're here because of your hard work and dedication. No one can take that from you." While she valued his support, Sasha couldn't entirely escape the pressure of carrying a globally recognized surname. Upon entering the bustling Reagan National Airport terminal, Sasha was greeted by the chaotic symphony of early morning travelers. Announcements echoed intermittently above the hum of conversations, while the rhythmic click of luggage wheels reverberated against the tiled floors. Aromas of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the faint but distinctive scent of jet fuel. Despite the commotion, Sasha maneuvered deftly through the throng, her slim frame allowing her to weave past clusters of passengers. Approaching the check-in counter, she offered her ticket and ID to the attendant behind the desk, a woman identified by a name tag reading M. Reynolds. Without so much as a greeting, Reynolds glanced up, her expression indifferent. "Good morning," Sasha said, her tone polite yet firm. Reynolds finally acknowledged her presence, but her gaze shifted between Sasha's face and her documents, suspicion shadowing her features. "Flying to New York?" Reynolds asked flatly. "Yes, business class," Sasha confirmed. Reynolds raised an eyebrow, scrutinizing the ticket as though it might be counterfeit. She hesitated for a moment longer than necessary, the air between them thick with tension. "Are you sure this is your ticket?" she inquired, her voice laced with doubt. Caught off guard, Sasha blinked but quickly composed herself. "Yes, it's mine. Is there an issue?" Reynolds's lips tightened as she scrutinized the ticket again, toggling between the paper and her computer screen. After a beat, she muttered something vague and dismissive before waving for another employee to join her. Whispering while occasionally glancing toward Sasha, Reynolds pointed in her direction. Soon, a second staff member approached, his demeanor stiff and wary. "This ticket is for business class," he stated, his tone dripping with skepticism. "I'm aware," Sasha replied, her voice calm but resolute. The two employees exchanged glances before reluctantly allowing her through, their dismissal leaving her seething. Clutching her ticket, Sasha walked toward security, her father's advice echoing in her mind. "Never let anyone make you feel lesser than who you are." At the security checkpoint, the line moved steadily as agents issued sharp instructions. Sasha placed her bag on the conveyor belt and stepped through the metal detector without issue. Reaching for her belongings on the other side, she was abruptly stopped by a TSA agent. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "We need to conduct a secondary screening." Sasha frowned. "Why? Is there a problem?" "Just a random check," the agent replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. Despite her frustration, Sasha complied. The so-called random screening felt invasive, involving a meticulous pat-down and a thorough rummage through her belongings. The agent questioned her with thinly veiled suspicion. "Who paid for your ticket?" he asked, holding up her boarding pass. "I did," Sasha answered curtly. "It's for a conference," the agent smirked. "Pretty upscale conference if you're flying business class." Sasha flushed with anger, but kept her composure. When the screening ended, she collected her items and moved on, shaken but determined not to let the ordeal affect her focus. With less than an hour until her flight, Sasha picked up her pace toward the gate. However, as she neared it, she noticed a group of airline staff murmuring and casting glances in her direction. One of them, a stern-looking woman, approached with an air of authority. "Miss, may I see your ticket and ID again?" the woman asked, her tone devoid of warmth. Sasha handed over her documents, her patience waning. The woman examined them closely before stating, "We've been informed there may be an issue with your ticket. Please follow me." "What kind of issue?" Sasha demanded, her voice edged with irritation. "Just a routine verification," the woman replied dismissively, already turning toward a secluded corridor. Sasha hesitated, her instincts warning her that something felt amiss. Nevertheless, she followed, her heartbeat quickening with each step down the narrow hallway. Sasha Obama found herself in a moment that tested her patience, dignity, and resolve. Her journey to New York was interrupted in a way she never anticipated, and the fallout was just beginning. Subscribe and share where you're watching from as we dive into this dramatic turn of events. The corridor Sasha had been led to felt like an escape from the bustling terminal, yet it offered no sense of refuge. The woman who had brought her there abruptly stopped, turned on her heel, and delivered her verdict without hesitation. "I'm sorry, but we can't allow you to board this flight," she said, her tone devoid of empathy. The words hit Sasha like a thunderclap. "Why?" Sasha demanded, her voice tinged with disbelief. The woman simply shrugged, her indifference sharpening the sting. "We have our reasons." Fury surged through Sasha, a mix of humiliation and defiance bubbling to the surface. "This is unacceptable. I've done nothing wrong." The woman crossed her arms, her posture rigid. "If you don't leave willingly, security will escort you out." Sasha's fists clenched, her nails digging into her palms. Tears threatened to spill, but she refused to show weakness. She inhaled deeply, pulled out her phone, and called the one person she knew could help. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling. "I need you." The calm voice on the other end replied, "I'm on my way." While those words offered some comfort, they did little to quell the tempest inside her. The corridor was silent, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the terminal she had just left. It felt isolated and oppressive, with its faint hum of fluorescent lights and the distant echo of travelers' footsteps. Near a door labeled "Authorized Personnel Only," Sasha stood gripping her bag tightly, her thoughts a whirlwind. Should she leave the corridor and return to the terminal where others could witness this blatant injustice? Or should she stay put, as her father had advised? Her phone buzzed with a text. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Stay where you are." Sasha exhaled slowly, grounding herself, but the events of the morning replayed in her mind. Each interaction, the suspicious looks, the whispered conversations, the invasive screening, highlighted a pattern she had come to recognize. This wasn't just a random inconvenience. It was a deliberate act of prejudice, far too blatant to ignore. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps snapped her out of her thoughts. Two TSA agents approached, their expressions as cold and formal as their stiff postures. The male agent carried a clipboard, gripping it like a shield, while the female agent wielded a handheld scanner. "Ma'am, we need to conduct an additional screening," the man said curtly. "Please place your bag on the table." Sasha's jaw tightened. "I've already been screened twice," she replied, her voice calm but resolute. She had been raised to maintain composure even in moments of clear injustice. "This is a random check," the female agent insisted, her tone robotic. "Compliance is mandatory." With reluctance, Sasha placed her bag on the table, her frustration simmering beneath the surface. The agents unzipped the bag and began sifting through her belongings without care, treating her possessions as if they were contraband. Her laptop was opened and inspected with unwarranted scrutiny. Her toiletries were dumped out, their contents scattered haphazardly. "Is this really necessary?" Sasha asked, her voice wavering slightly despite her efforts to remain composed. The male agent ignored her, picking up a book from her bag. "What's this about?" he asked, his tone accusatory. "It's a book for the conference I'm attending," she said, her patience wearing thin. He squinted at the cover as though it were written in hieroglyphics, then tossed it aside dismissively. The female agent, meanwhile, ran the scanner over Sasha's laptop with exaggerated care, dragging out the process. Sasha looked around, hoping for a passerby who might intervene, but the corridor remained deserted. After several agonizing minutes, the male agent stepped back. "We'll need to hold on to your bag for further analysis," he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "No!" Sasha snapped, instinctively stepping forward. "You can't just take my things. I have a flight to catch." The female agent's gaze hardened. "Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we'll escalate this matter." "Escalate?" Sasha repeated, her voice rising. "You've already humiliated me and now you're trying to confiscate my belongings? This is harassment." Her words echoed down the corridor, their power amplified by the silence. The agents exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. The man took a step closer, his voice dripping with condescension. "You need to calm down. We're just doing our job." Sasha took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She knew she couldn't let her emotions get the better of her. "Not here. Not now. I'm not going anywhere without my bag," she said, her tone quieter but unyielding. Before the male agent could respond, another figure appeared at the end of the corridor, the manager who had earlier ordered Sasha aside. Flanked by 2 security guards, her presence made the already confined space feel even smaller. "What's going on here?" the manager demanded, her sharp voice cutting through the tension. The female agent straightened immediately. "We're conducting a secondary screening. She's refusing to comply." "That's not true," Sasha interjected, her voice firm. "I've complied with everything you've asked, and now they're trying to take my bag for no reason." The manager's eyes narrowed as she appraised Sasha, her expression unreadable. This moment felt like the precipice of something larger. Sasha Obama found herself cornered in a situation that felt both surreal and unjust. The words of the airport manager stung like a slap. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the airport." Her heart sank. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice trembling. The manager's expression remained unmoved. "We have the right to deny service to anyone who poses a potential security risk." "A security risk?" Sasha repeated, incredulous. "You're calling me a security risk? Because you don't like how I look?" The silence following her words was suffocating. The guards stepped forward, their imposing presence amplifying the tension. Sasha felt her chest tighten, her breath shallow as panic threatened to overwhelm her. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. Steeling herself, Sasha took out her phone, her hands trembling as she dialed the number of the one person she knew would stand by her. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking slightly, "I need you. They're kicking me out of the airport." On the other end, her father's voice was calm yet commanding. "Stay where you are. I'll handle it." The call ended, leaving Sasha alone in the oppressive quiet of the corridor. Turning back to the manager and the guards, she declared with quiet determination, "My father is on his way. I suggest you think very carefully about your next move." "I?" The manager hesitated, her confidence flickering, but the male TSA agent smirked, muttering loud enough for Sasha to hear, "Daddy's coming to save the day, huh?" Sasha clenched her jaw, but refused to respond to the taunt. Instead, she leaned against the wall, her composure a thin veneer over the storm of humiliation and frustration roiling within her. The guards and agents continued to watch her, their stares heavy with judgment, but she refused to let them see her falter. Beyond the corridor, the bustling terminal carried on, announcements echoing, travelers hurrying to their gates, oblivious to the unfolding drama. For Sasha, however, time crawled. Each passing second felt like an eternity. Then, finally, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the stifling silence. The steady, purposeful rhythm was unmistakable. Relief washed over Sasha as she looked up to see her father, Barack Obama, striding toward her with an air of composed determination. His presence filled the corridor like a sudden change in the weather. The guards straightened instinctively, their postures stiffening. The manager, now visibly uneasy, adjusted her stance, a nervous smile briefly flickering across her face. Barack's voice was calm yet firm as he addressed his daughter. "Miss Obama," he said, his tone measured and reassuring. "Are you all right?" Sasha nodded, her voice catching in her throat as she tried to answer. They were going to kick me out of the airport." Barack turned his gaze to the manager, his expression unreadable but heavy with expectation. "Is that true?" he asked, his tone polite but unyielding. The manager faltered, her eyes darting to the TSA agents for support. "Sir," she began defensively, "we had concerns regarding her behavior. She was becoming disruptive, and we have protocols for such situations. Disruptive? Barack repeated, raising an eyebrow. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to his words. Can you explain exactly how my daughter was being disruptive? The manager hesitated, but the male TSA agent seized the moment. Speaking with unwarranted confidence, she refused to comply with our security procedures. We were just trying to do our job. That's not true, Sasha interjected, her voice trembling with both anger and resolve. I complied with everything you asked. You treated me like a criminal for no reason. And when I stood up for myself, you decided to call it disruption. Barack's gaze swept over the group, his expression hardening as he absorbed the words. His voice was steady, but carried undeniable authority. It seems to me that there's been a serious misunderstanding, he began. Let's address this properly. First, my daughter is not leaving this airport unless she chooses to. Second, I want a clear and detailed explanation of why she was singled out in the first place. The manager cleared her throat, visibly flustered. Sir, as I said, we have protocols. Her ticket was flagged, and we followed up accordingly. Flagged for what? Barack pressed, his tone sharpening. She had a valid ticket, proper ID, and was prepared to board her flight. What exactly warranted this additional scrutiny? The manager faltered, her confidence crumbling under Barack's unwavering gaze. The male TSA agent, however, crossed his arms defiantly. Sometimes we have to make judgment calls, he said, his voice firm, especially when something doesn't feel right. Barack's expression darkened as he repeated the words slowly. Something didn't feel right. He paused, letting the weight of his question hang in the air before continuing. You made a judgment call based on how my daughter looks, didn't you? The corridor fell silent, the tension almost unbearable. The female TSA agent shifted uncomfortably, glancing at her colleague, who now avoided her gaze. I assure you, sir, the manager began, her voice shaking, we don't tolerate discrimination in this airport. That's an admirable policy, Barack replied, his tone icy. But actions speak louder than policies. The weight of the morning's events hung heavy in the corridor, each moment compounding Sasha Obama's humiliation. Her father, Barack Obama, stood as a calming presence, but his words carried a quiet storm. This reeks of bias, he began, his voice calm but firm. My daughter is standing here humiliated and distressed because your team decided she didn't belong in business class. Am I wrong? No one responded. The silence was deafening, a tacit admission of guilt that lingered like a heavy cloud. Barack exhaled slowly, the sound thick with disappointment, before turning to his daughter. His expression softened as he asked gently, Are you ready to go? Sasha nodded, clutching her bag tightly. She wanted nothing more than to leave this nightmare behind, but a part of her bristled at the thought of letting the people responsible off the hook. As they turned to leave, the manager stammered, Wait, sir. Perhaps we can discuss this further. Barack paused, his back to the group. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady, but the warning in his tone was unmistakable. You'll be hearing from me, and I suggest you prepare yourselves for a thorough review of your so-called protocols. Without another word, he placed a protective hand on Sasha's shoulder and guided her back toward the main terminal. The corridor behind them remained eerily silent, the air heavy with the consequences of their departure. Sasha felt a wave of relief as they walked, but it was tinged with frustration. She glanced at her father, searching his face for some glimpse of his emotions, but his expression remained calm, his focus fixed straight ahead. Dad, she said hesitantly, breaking the silence. I'm sorry you had to come down here. I didn't know what else to do. Barack stopped and turned to her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. Sasha, you don't have to apologize for standing up for yourself, he said, his voice warm yet resolute. What happened here today is unacceptable, and it's not your fault. You did the right thing by calling me. His words offered some solace, but the sting of the morning's events still lingered. They treated me like I didn't belong, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I know, Barack replied, his tone a mix of sadness and quiet anger. And they're going to answer for it. As they made their way back toward the terminal, the familiar buzz of airport life filled the silence between them. Announcements blared overhead, travelers hurried to their gates, and the low murmur of conversations created a jarring contrast to the oppressive quiet of the corridor. Sasha watched her father closely, noting the sharpness in his usually measured stride, a sign of the quiet fury he rarely let show. They stopped near a row of chairs, far enough from the security checkpoint to avoid prying eyes, but close enough to keep a watchful distance. Sasha sank into one of the chairs, clutching her bag like a lifeline. Her father remained standing, scanning the area with calm authority. "Dad," she said softly, her voice strained. "I don't want this to happen to anyone else." Her words hung in the air for a moment before Barack nodded, his tone firm. "It won't. We'll make sure of that." Just then, a uniformed airline representative approached them, her expression a mixture of unease and professionalism. Flanked by two more staff members, her body language was stiff and awkward. The name tag on her blazer read, "M. Patel, Mr. Obama," she began, her tone carefully controlled. "On behalf of the airport and our airline, I want to apologize for any inconvenience you and your daughter have experienced this morning." Barack turned to face her fully, his expression unreadable but unyielding. "Inconvenience?" he repeated, his voice calm but with a cutting edge that made Patel shift uncomfortably. "Is that what you call it?" Patel faltered slightly before responding. "I assure you, we take these matters very seriously. I've been informed of the situation, and I want you to know that we're looking into it." "Looking into it," Barack echoed, his tone clipped. "Let me be clear, Ms. Patel. My daughter was humiliated, singled out, and treated as though she didn't belong. That's not an inconvenience. It's discrimination. If your staff can't see the difference, then you have a much bigger problem than you realize." Sasha watched silently, a mix of vindication and lingering frustration swirling within her. Patel's face reddened, and she glanced nervously at her colleagues, who avoided eye contact. "We deeply regret what happened," Patel said, her voice softer now. "If there's anything we can do to make this right—" "There is," Barack interrupted, his voice steady but unrelenting. "First, I want the names of every TSA agent and staff member involved in this incident. Second, I expect a full report on your so-called protocols that allowed this to happen. And third, I want to ensure that this behavior is addressed and eradicated, not just for my daughter, but for every traveler who walks through this airport." Patel nodded hastily, pulling out a notepad and scribbling furiously. "Of course, Mr. Obama, I'll personally oversee the investigation." "You'll do more than oversee it," Barack said, his tone cool but firm. "You'll act. Because if I don't see immediate, concrete changes, I'll make sure this incident is brought to the attention of every major news outlet in the country." The threat, though delivered in an even tone, sent visible ripples of unease through the group. Patel nodded again, her hand trembling slightly as she continued to write. As the representatives hurried away, Barack turned back to Sasha. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, grounding her in the chaos. "We're not done here," he said, "but for now, let's get you to where you need to be." As the tension in the airport simmered, the airline's decision to delay the flight for Sasha and Barack Obama quickly became the subject of murmurs among the waiting passengers. Whispers spread like wildfire, and curious onlookers craned their necks, eager to catch a glimpse of the former president. Sasha, feeling the weight of their stares, kept her gaze fixed on the ground, her father's steady presence the only anchor in the storm of unwanted attention. The gate agent, a young man with a nervous demeanor, fumbled with their boarding passes before scanning them with exaggerated politeness. "Have a great flight, Mr. Obama," he said, his voice trembling as he gestured them through. Barack responded with a curt nod, his focus unwavering as he led Sasha down the jet bridge. Once inside the plane, Sasha exhaled deeply, releasing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For the first time that morning, she felt a glimmer of relief. The familiarity of the cabin, the neutral hum of engines, and the absence of prying eyes offered a brief reprieve. Seated next to her, Barack turned, his expression softening as he asked, "Are you okay?" Sasha nodded, but couldn't hide the lingering unease in her voice. "I'm just tired." Barack placed a reassuring hand over hers. "I know, but you did the right thing, Sasha. Standing up for yourself, calling me, that takes courage. Her eyes welled with unshed tears, but she blinked them away. It shouldn't have to. No, Barack agreed, his voice heavy with quiet conviction. It shouldn't. But until people stop making assumptions based on someone's appearance, we have to keep pushing back. The flight passed uneventfully, but the weight of the morning's events remained with Sasha, pressing down on her like an unshakable burden. Staring out the window at the endless expanse of clouds, her mind replayed every humiliating detail: the accusatory questions, the invasive searches, and the smirking condescension of the agents. She thought about the broader implications, about how many others might have faced similar injustices without the safety net of a powerful advocate. "What are you thinking about?" Barack's voice interrupted her thoughts, calm yet probing. Turning to him, Sasha's expression hardened with resolve. "How to make sure this never happens again." Barack smiled faintly, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Good. Because this fight isn't just about you or me. It's about everyone who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong." By the time they landed in New York, Sasha felt a renewed sense of purpose. As they exited the plane, Barack's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at it briefly, his expression darkening. "What is it?" Sasha asked, noticing the shift in his demeanor. Barack turned the screen toward her. It was an email from Monsieur Patel, the airline representative, outlining immediate steps to address the incident. The final line caught Sasha's attention. "We've also placed the agents involved on administrative leave pending further investigation." "It's a start," Sasha murmured, her tone skeptical. The email hung in the air between them as they walked through the terminal at John F. Kennedy International Airport. For Sasha, the words offered a glimmer of validation, but did little to erase the rawness of her emotions. Each humiliating moment still lingered, like a splinter lodged too deep to remove. As they stepped outside, the cacophony of New York City greeted them. Blaring horns, distant sirens, and the chatter of pedestrians. Yet the familiar chaos provided little solace for Sasha, her thoughts still consumed by the morning's events. Sliding into the back seat of a waiting car, she hesitated before speaking. "Dad," she began quietly, "do you think anything will actually change? I mean, they suspended those agents, but isn't that just damage control?" Barack turned to her, his gaze steady. "You're right to be skeptical," he said. "Suspensions are a start, but they're not enough. Accountability has to go deeper. The systems that allow this kind of behavior need to be dismantled." Sasha nodded, though frustration still simmered beneath her surface. "I just don't want this to be swept under the rug." "It won't be," Barack assured her. "We'll make sure of that." As the car navigated through the crowded streets, Barack made a call to his team, his voice calm but charged with urgency. He outlined the events at Reagan National Airport in meticulous detail, emphasizing the need for a comprehensive response. By the time they reached their destination, he had already set a plan in motion. The next morning, the story broke in the media, dominating headlines and sparking a national conversation. Articles like "Sasha Obama targeted in airport discrimination scandal" and "Former President demands accountability for TSA misconduct" flooded news outlets, accompanied by fiery debates on social media. Supporters rallied behind the Obamas, flooding platforms with messages of solidarity, while critics accused them of overreacting or exploiting their influence. Amid the noise, one truth emerged. The incident had struck a nerve. Within days, an internal investigation was launched. Reagan National Airport, the TSA, and the airline faced intense scrutiny. Reports of similar complaints from other passengers began surfacing, painting a troubling picture of systemic issues. Whistleblowers from within the TSA came forward, revealing a culture rife with implicit bias and unchecked authority. The agents involved, including one identified as Mark Henson, were placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. Henson, in leaked statements, defended his actions as protocol-driven, though his words did little to quell public outrage. Barack watched the unfolding coverage with a mix of satisfaction and determination. The fight was far from over, but but a spark had been ignited, a call for change that resonated far beyond the walls of an airport terminal. The events surrounding Sasha Obama's experience at Reagan National Airport sparked a firestorm of accountability and reform. But it was clear to both Sasha and her father, Barack Obama, that the work was far from over. While the media's attention kept the pressure on, Barack understood that lasting change required more than outrage. It demanded systemic reform. Addressing the system in Washington, Barack met with representatives from the TSA and the Department of Transportation. The atmosphere was tense, with officials prepared to defend their policies, but Barack's presence commanded respect. His opening words set the tone. "This isn't just about my daughter," he began, his voice calm but resolute. "This is about every individual who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong because of how they look, where they come from, or what others assume about them." What happened at Reagan National Airport is a symptom of a larger problem, and it's a problem we have both the power and the responsibility to fix. Barack presented a series of reforms aimed at addressing systemic issues within the TSA. These included mandatory bias training for all employees, the establishment of an independent oversight committee to handle complaints, and clearer protocols to prevent abuse of authority. While some officials nodded in agreement, others exchanged skeptical glances. By the end of the meeting, however, Barack had secured a commitment to begin implementing the proposed changes. Accountability and consequences. As the investigation unfolded, public scrutiny intensified. The agents involved in Sasha's ordeal faced mounting consequences. Mark Henson, the TSA agent who mocked Sasha during the screening, became a lightning rod for criticism. Videos of his past interactions with passengers surfaced, revealing a troubling pattern of rudeness and bias. A whistleblower from within the TSA came forward anonymously, sharing that Henson had made disparaging remarks about passengers of color on multiple occasions. Henson was swiftly terminated, and the colleagues who had supported or ignored his behavior faced similar fates. The manager who ordered Sasha's removal was also dismissed after an internal review found her actions unjustified. Although framed publicly as a resignation, insiders confirmed that the decision had been anything but voluntary. For Sasha, the fallout was bittersweet. She followed the news closely, her emotions oscillating between relief and lingering anger. Holding individuals accountable was a step forward, but she knew the systemic issues that enabled such behavior were far from resolved. Speaking out, determined to channel her experience into meaningful action, Sasha began speaking publicly about the incident. In interviews and at events, her words carried the weight of authenticity and purpose. She shared her ordeal candidly, using it as a lens to discuss broader issues of bias and inequality. Her voice resonated with audiences across the country, amplifying the stories of others who had faced similar injustices. Barack stood by her side, offering guidance but encouraging her to take ownership of her narrative. "This is your fight too," he told her one evening. "You have the power to make a difference. Don't be afraid to use it." Progress in motion. By the end of the month, the reforms Barack had championed were beginning to take shape. TSA employees nationwide underwent mandatory bias training, and a new hotline for reporting misconduct was established. The Independent Oversight Committee, though still in its early stages, promised to bring greater accountability to the agency. For Sasha, these changes were a step in the right direction, but she knew the fight was far from over. The experience at Reagan National Airport remained a painful reminder of the pervasive inequalities that persisted, yet it also underscored the power of speaking out and the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of adversity. A new chapter. The morning sun cast a golden glow over Washington, D.C., as Barack Obama sipped his coffee on the balcony of his family's home. The whirlwind of media attention, high-stakes meetings, and policy proposals had begun to subside. Yet, as he gazed out over the city, a quiet determination settled within him. This wasn't the first fight for systemic change he had undertaken, and it wouldn't be the last. Inside, Sasha prepared for a public appearance at a national conference on social justice and equity. The opportunity to share her story and lessons learned filled her with a mix of nerves and resolve. Standing before the mirror, adjusting her blazer, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "How are you feeling?" Barack asked, his tone gentle. "Nervous," Sasha admitted, turning to meet his gaze. "But ready," Barack smiled. "You've got this. Just speak from the heart. People need to hear your truth." His words were comforting, but Sasha couldn't shake the weight of responsibility she felt. The incident at Reagan National Airport had been a catalyst for change, but it also illuminated how much work remained. Taking the stage. The conference venue, a grand hall in downtown D.C., buzzed with energy. Its walls were adorned with banners proclaiming themes of justice, equality, and progress. As Sasha and Barack entered, a wave of applause and camera flashes greeted them. Drawing strength from her father's calm presence, Sasha focused on the mission ahead. The audience was a diverse mix of activists, policymakers, students, and community leaders. As Sasha stepped onto the stage, her nerves gave way to determination. Her voice, steady and powerful, carried her story to every corner of the room. "This isn't just about what happened to me," she began. "It's about a culture that allows bias to thrive and go unchecked. It's about the systems that silence marginalized voices, and it's about what we're going to do to change that." Her words resonated deeply, sparking a standing ovation. In that moment, Sasha felt the true impact of her voice, a force that could inspire change and challenge injustice. A continued fight. As the conference concluded, Sasha and Barack left the hall, the echoes of applause still ringing in their ears. For Sasha, the journey had only just begun. The fight for equality and accountability would be long, but she was ready to face it head-on, empowered by her experience and determined to create a better world for everyone. The room fell into a hush as Sasha Obama took her place at the podium, the weight of hundreds of expectant eyes resting on her. She gripped the edges of the podium, steadying herself, and drew a deep breath. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "My name is Sasha Obama, and I'm here today to share a story that, sadly, is not unique to me." She paused, letting her opening words resonate in the silent hall before continuing. "A few weeks ago, I was traveling to New York for a conference. What should have been a routine trip turned into an experience of humiliation, bias, and discrimination. I was singled out, scrutinized, and ultimately removed from the airport, not because of anything I did, but because of how I was perceived." Her voice grew stronger as she recounted the events in vivid detail, the invasive searches, the dismissive attitudes, and the blatant assumptions that had defined her ordeal. She spoke of the emotional toll, the frustration, and the humiliation. Yet, her words carried a note of resilience, a determination that had allowed her to push through. "This isn't just about me," she said, her gaze sweeping across the diverse crowd before her. "It's about every person who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong. It's about a system that allows prejudice to dictate how people are treated. And it's about the change we must demand together." The room erupted in applause, the powerful message striking a chord with everyone in attendance. As Sasha stepped down from the stage, her father greeted her with a proud smile, pulling her into a warm embrace. "You were incredible," Barack said, his voice filled with pride. That was exactly what people needed to hear. Sasha felt a surge of relief and pride, but also a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead would be long, but she was ready to face it. In the weeks that followed, the reforms initiated by Barack began to take root. Nationwide, TSA employees attended mandatory bias training designed to challenge stereotypes and foster empathy. An independent oversight committee was established, tasked with investigating complaints and holding staff accountable for misconduct. The hotline for reporting discrimination became fully operational, offering passengers a direct channel to voice their concerns. While many praised these measures as a significant step toward equity, others resisted, dismissing them as unnecessary or burdensome. Barack, however, was undeterred by the opposition. His resolve remained firm, and so did Sasha's. Sasha used her platform to amplify the voices of others who had faced similar injustices. Through speeches, interviews, and social media, she shared stories that brought the issue of systemic bias into the national conversation. One afternoon, she received an email from a young woman who had recently traveled through Reagan National Airport. The woman described her experience, noting the kindness and respect she had been shown by TSA agents, a stark contrast to her past interactions. "I don't know what changed," the email read, "but I wanted to thank you. Your story made a difference." Sasha read the message twice, her heart swelling with gratitude and hope. She forwarded it to her father, who replied with a simple but powerful message: "This is why we fight." Over the months, the ripple effects of the incident continued to spread. Other airports began adopting similar reforms, and advocacy groups pushed for broader changes across various industries. The conversation expanded beyond the TSA, touching on bias in policing, education, healthcare, and more. For Sasha, the experience became a transformative moment. It was painful and humiliating, but it also taught her the importance of resilience and speaking out. She had found her voice, and with it, the ability to inspire change. One evening, as she and Barack sat on their balcony, the city lights twinkling in the distance, Sasha turned to her father with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think things will ever really change?" she asked, her voice soft, but weighted with the question's gravity. Barack took a sip of his coffee, his gaze steady. "Change is slow," he replied, "but every step forward matters, every voice raised, every injustice challenged. It all adds up. And the fact that you care enough to ask that question and fight for a better future means we're already moving in the right direction." Sasha nodded, her resolve strengthening. The fight ahead would be long and arduous, but she was ready to walk that road, empowered by her experience and determined to make a difference. The story of Sasha Obama's experience at Reagan National Airport became a symbol of the ongoing fight for justice and equality. It reminded the world of the power of resilience, the necessity of accountability, and the potential for change when people stand together. For Sasha, it marked the beginning of a journey that would shape her future in ways she could never have imagined. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories and share this video with your friends to spark meaningful conversations. See you in the next episode.